All right, liberal arts. Here we are. We're going to look at our triangle congruence quiz study guide. So I'll go through all these questions, give you the answers, explain the answers so that you're better prepared for the quiz. So let's start. Let's go ahead. There's plenty to do here. So looking at number 1, look at the figure below. Are these triangles congruent? Explain why or why not. So what we see is we see a set of one congruent sides. We see a second set of congruent sides, and we see the angle in between those two sides also congruent. So we have two sides and an angle, two side pairs and an angle pair of congruence, and that angle is between the two sides for both of them. So what that indicates to us is side, angle, side. You have a side, continuing, angle, continuing, side. And same thing over here, side, continuing, angle, continuing, side. Side, angle, side. The angle is between the two sides, thus it's side, angle, side instead of something like side, side, angle, which doesn't actually exist. Side, angle, side though. So we would say yes. And you could be more elaborate on this. Essentially, yes, because of side, angle, side. So now let's look at number 2. Look at the figure. And this, I think I might have, I didn't rearrange order. This is how it is on your guys' thing, I believe. Look at the figure below. Are these triangles congruent? Explain why or why not. So here, again, let's identify what we have congruent. We have a pair of angles that are congruent. We have a pair of sides that are congruent, and we have another pair of sides that are congruent. So again, two sides and an angle. However, the angle is not between the two sides. The angle is opposite of those two sides. So what we have here would be something that actually is not congruent. We do see that they have two sides and an angle matching. However, side-side angle or angle side-side, however you want to put it, is not one of the congruent postulates, if you will. So it seems like, hey, they're congruent because they have everything matching and lining up, but you have to remember side-side angle or angle side-side is not actually a provable congruence. It's not enough information. It's not one of the 4 major ones that we talked about. We talked about side, angle, side. We talked about side, side, side. We talked about angle, side, angle, and we talked about angle, angle, side. These are the 4 that we would consider. And so side, side, angle is not one of them. So this is not provable congruence. So we would say no, because side, side, angle is not let's say valid, I guess. Valid congruence. It very may well be that these triangles are congruent. However, the information that's given to us is not the information that is used as far as provability goes. It's not provable that these two triangles are congruent. They could be, but not based on that information can we confirm it. So number 3, Eleanor started drawing 2 triangles. Her figure so far is shown below. What can Eleanor do to guarantee that AC is equal to DF? So she's trying to make sure that this side would be the same as when she draws DF. She wants to know that they'd be the same length. And if you look at our answer choices, we're considering angles, the measure of angle. So here's the thing. Remember the 4 postulates we've talked about, right? Side, angle, side, 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 side. Angle, side, angle, and angle, angle, side. Now, given the fact that we have one pair of congruent sides, we have a second pair of congruent sides, and the fact that none of the answer choices represent any sides, we can't do side, side, side because none of the. I mean, we could theoretically if we knew that this length was the exact same as this one, but I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to make it the same length through a use of making sure the angles are correct. So what we're going to go with here is if we can confirm that angle E and angle B are the same angle, if these are the same angle, then that opening will be the same distance, and thus this line would be the same as DF. If we can make those angles congruent, then we should have congruent triangles, and that would be by side, angle, side, because we would have a side, angle, side congruence. Side, angle, side congruence. So angle B would have to be the same as angle E, which is answer choice B. That's the idea there. It's kind of referencing a side, angle, side. Look at the figure below. Number 4. What statement is true about these triangles? Okay, so this one's a very tricky one because you do have to follow the order again. The order is very important. So, STU, so let's again pay attention to the order here. STU. Actually, what might help us is if we reference which angles, we know which sides are obviously congruent, but which angles correspond to which angles. So notice S is the angle between the side with 1 and 2 tick marks. So angle M is its corresponding angle because it's the side between 1 and 2 tick marks, right? So let's note that. Let's say, S is congruent with M. They correspond. T is the angle between 1 and 3 tick marks, the sides with 1 and 3 tick marks. So the side between 1 and 3 tick marks, or the angle between 1 and 3 tick marks, is L. So L is its corresponding with T. And so that makes U correspond to N, which is the angle between the 2 and 3 mark sides. Angle that connects the 2 mark and the 3 mark sides. So that is angle U as well, the 2 and the 3 mark sides. Okay, that's going to help us here because essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that we correspond to everything accurately. So STU is congruent to NLM. So S would have to correspond with N for this to be true. Now we already know S does not correspond with N. S corresponds with M. T corresponds with L, as we mentioned, and U corresponds with N. So we want to make sure that those are in the same order in our answer. So S would correspond with M, not N. So it can't be A. So B, S is corresponding with L. And again, we know that that's not true based on the picture we've already drawn, is S is corresponding with M. So that can't be it. Now the third one, T is corresponding with L, which is good. That's what it's supposed to do. S is corresponding with M, which is good. That's what it's supposed to do. And U corresponds with N, which is good. That's what it's supposed to do. So those are all corresponding matches. Remember, it's essentially kind of a matching game. We're trying to say the correct order of what is corresponding with what. So they went T, S, U is corresponding with L, M, N. And those are corresponding because we've already mentioned which angles they correspond with. S corresponds with M, T corresponds with L, and U corresponds with N. And just to prove why the last one doesn't work, so this one says T corresponds with M, as again we know is false. It also says that U corresponds with N, which is true, but S corresponds with L, which again we know is false. So the only one that has all three correspondents matching is answer choice C. So pay attention to that. I think that helps. Also, what you can read from this is that side TS would correspond with side LM, because again, they're the first two and the first two for each of these labels. Okay, and that's true. TS is the side with one hash mark, and LM is the side with one hash mark. Now, the way of looking at it is, let's look at side SU. Side SU should be correspond with side MN. So side SU is a double tick mark side, and side MN is also the double tick mark side. So those do correspond. Remember, the order here is extremely important. The order here has to match. They have to correspond. So that's what they're looking for, and that's number 4. Look at the figure below. What additional information is needed to prove the triangles ABC and EFG are congruent by side-side-side triangle congruence theorem? Well, we of course need to know all 3 sides are congruent. So we would have to know that EF would be congruent with AB. We would also need to know that BC is congruent with FG. And we would also, of course, need to know that AC is congruent with EG. Now, what I notice here, it's got this one little tick mark, but it doesn't have the matching tick mark here. For some reason, they left that out. I would assume it's supposed to be there, but it's not. Same thing with the double tick mark. It's here, but it's left out of here. And I don't know why they would do that. I guess to indicate that it's not saying for sure that this side is the same length as that one, which is why I emphasized it down here. I labeled it anyway, just in case. EF is congruent with AB, because even though AB doesn't have that double tick mark, it should still be, if we're trying to prove by side, those 2 sides should match. Same thing with BC and FG. It's not correctly labeling the fact that it's congruent because it doesn't have a tick mark there. So I went ahead and said it as well, just to make sure that we consider that those would be congruent. And then, of course, the final side, the third side, the hypotenuse of the side here, or the longer of the sides, we have, not even any tick marks. But yes, they should still be congruent because you need all 3 sides to be congruent, side, to have a side triangle congruence theorem. All right, so now let's work on the bottom half here. So write whether the angle-side congruence theorem or angle-side angle congruence theorem, or neither, can be used to prove congruence. So the first one, we have a pair of angles congruent. We also have another pair of angles congruent. It's implied, of course, that if this is a right angle, that so is the other side. So we have 2 pairs of angles that are congruent, and we also have its connecting side. This is congruent because they share the same side. So that's also congruent. Now notice that that side is between the angles. Side goes between the angles, then this is an angle-side angle congruence theorem. Here, note again, their corresponding side, they have a sharing side there, so let's make a little mark. And they have, again, 2 angles. They have 1 pair and 2 pairs of congruent angles. However, the side is not between the angles. The side is away from those angles. The side between the angles would have been this one, but we can't confirm that those are congruent because they're not being shared. This side is the one that's shared, so that's the one that we know is congruent. So what we have here is we have angle, side. You could also, of course, say side, angle. It would mean the same thing, so it would be fine. I'm gonna leave that little tick mark there. All right. Now here we have a pair of vertical angles. Remember when it makes this pair of vertical angles, it's implying, just like the sides here that match, it's implied that those sides are congruent, which is why I put the tick mark there. When you see these vertical angles like this, it's also implying that those angles are congruent, that this angle is congruent with that angle because of vertical angles. That's what vertical angles do. Okay, so we'll notice again that with one triangle, we have 2 angles, and again, the side in between them corresponding. So we have an angle, side, angle again. And then our 4th one down here. This one, we have 1 pair of side matching congruents, and we have 1 pair of angles. So 1 pair of side, 1 pair of angles. Now, these 2 shapes are not converging at all, so there's no vertical angle like the last one. There's no corresponding sides that are sharing the same border, like the very first one and the second one that we did. So there is nothing else I can add to this. All I know is one pair of sides congruent and one pair of angles congruent. And that's it. That's all the information I have. So this is not enough information to determine. So we'll say neither. Now, if we had, for example, either this angle congruent, that would have been angle, angle, side if we were given that. If we were given the other angle, that also would have been angle, angle, side, because you would read it angle, angle, side, or if you went this way, side, angle, angle. But it does not give us that information, unfortunately. So it's neither. We would need one more bit of information to say whether it was side, angle, side, or sorry, angle, side, angle, or angle, angle, side. And then this last one, so I can see we have a pair of sides congruent. We have a second pair of sides congruent, and we have a pair of angles congruent as well. But let's check the order here. You know, for this one, we have a side. We go our way around, angle, side. This is a side, angle, side triangle. And here, if we go around, we have a side, side, angle triangle. So those do not match, and they're neither. Remember, we're talking about angle, angle, side, or angle, side, angle here. It's definitely neither of those. They don't match for one, and they're not. Wouldn't, even if they tried to match, they wouldn't be either angle, side, angle, or angle, angle, side. So there really isn't much here. Again, we would say for this one, we would say neither. So for part 7, now we're looking at all 4 of the congruent statements. So it could be any of them. So let's keep our eyes out. Remember to look out for a shared side. If it has a shared side, that those sides are congruent. So let's keep that in mind. All right. So with this one, kind of tricky, but let's focus our attention on one of the triangles. Let's see. If we focus our attention just on the top triangle, we have a side, and let's work our way around. Side, angle. Oops, I wrote the wrong letter there. Side, side, angle. Again, side, side, angle is not one of our 4 congruent postulates. And here's the reason why, by the way, if you're wondering why I had to read it side, side, angle, is because I can't go the other way around to try and claim it was side, angle, side. The reason is because I would be skipping that angle there. And you can't do that. You can't just skip something like that. Remember, for it to be a side, angle, side, the angle has to be between the 2 sides. Now, this angle is not between the 2 sides because the 2 sides are over here. Angle between them would have been this angle here. So if, instead of having this pair congruent, if it had this one and this one, then it would have been side, angle, side congruent, because you'd have the angle here in between the 2 sides. But again, given the information that we have, it is not between the 2 sides. So this one would have been side, side, angle, but again, that's not one of the 4 postulates. So we would say none here. Okay, we can't say that one is congruent. For this one, again, note the shared side. So the shared side here counts. And so we have an angle, side, angle, and going the other one, angle, side, angle. So the side is between the 2 angles. And when you have a side between 2 angles, then you've got angle, side, angle. So there's that one. Again, note the side here is congruent. So that means that you have 1 pair of congruent sides, you have 2 pairs of congruent sides, and this one counts as the 3rd pair of congruent sides. So you have all 3 sides congruent. That's side, side, side. Now we're looking at this next one. Remember, we have vertical angles. So be paying attention, looking for those vertical angles. I'm just going to abbreviate it VA for vertical angles. So these vertical angles are also congruent. So you have to kind of make a note of that. It's not given to you, but it's implying it. It wants you to remember that that's a third part of this congruence. We have one pair of angles. We have the second thing is a pair of sides congruent, and that third one is that pair of angles formed by the vertical angles. So we have an angle, side, angle match, angle, side, angle match. The side, again, as you'll note, the side of congruence is between the two angles. Side of congruence is between the two angles. So if you have a side between two angles, then you have angle, side, angle. All right, and of course, again, note the vertical angles one more time. Here, it makes that bow tie, it makes that X shape. So make a note of that. So we have a pair of sides congruent. We have another pair of sides congruent. And we have a pair of angles congruent. Now, keep in mind that our angles are in between the two sides. You've got this side, and the angle between them is the one that we're considering congruent. Same thing on the other side here. You have a side, you have another side, and the angle in between them is the one that's congruent. So you have the angle between the two sides, then you have side, angle, side congruence. All right. So now these are kind of tricky, these last ones. So let's push through. Let's try and get this one done, because I know this video is kind of running a little long. All right, state what additional information is required in order to know the triangles are congruent for the reason given. All right, so angle, side, angle. So let's zoom in on this. Now, remember, we already have a shared side, so this counts as a congruent side. So let's pay attention to that. I'm going to make that tick mark there because it's already known to us. So if we're going for angle, side, angle, then the side has to be between two angles. So here's that side that we're referring to. So if it's going to be between the two angles, then we would need the angles over here as well, because it would be the angle, the side, and the angle, and that side would then be sitting between our two angles. So we would need these two angles here to correspond, to match, to be congruent. And that's essentially angle U, but the way we'll write this is for the top triangle, we'll say it's angle DUT, because again, you can see we're going DUT. That's the way we would write this wedge there. And then for the bottom triangle, we'll say SUT, angle SUT. We need those two to be congruent. So that wedge and that wedge. For it to be angle, side, angle. Look at number 9, side, angle, side. So remember, we already have a shared side, so this counts as already one of them. So remember, if it's side, angle, side, the angle here is between two sides. So look at our angle, where we're at. We have that one on that triangle, this one on this triangle. Now, the angle would have to be between the two sides. So the other side that we would have, since we already have this side, let's talk about it for this left side triangle. The side that we would need to have is the bottom part here. Because if we had that side too, then the angle would be right between them. It can't be the other side. It can't be this one, because then that angle is not in between the two sides. So it would have to be this bottom side that we would need. And if we look at the other triangle, the one on the right here, again, we already have this side. We have this side, we have the angle here, so we would need this top side to be congruent so that the angle can be between those two sides. So what we're looking for is we're looking for WV to be congruent with XK. WV to be congruent with XK. So remember, we were already given, let me put this in red because it's, the angles are in red. The part here in the middle, that side we were already given was congruent. So we already knew XV was congruent with itself. It's just the third side that we needed to know. And that was going to be this one and this one, because that would make the angle sit between those two sides. All right. Side, angle, side. Again, so we're looking for that angle to be between two sides. So we have one side, and then we have the angle here. So the other side that we would need is this one, so that the angle can sit between those two sides. So we would need CA to be congruent with, let's look at the other one. So here again, we have a side, we have our angle. So the other side we would need is this one, so that the angle is sitting between the two sides. So that's LJ. So CA needs to be congruent with LJ. That would make a side angle side congruence. All right, looking at number 11, angle side angle. So again, notice the side has to be between the two angles. So here we have two angles. And so if we're looking for the side between them, it can't be DF because DF is not between the angles. Can't be EF. It's going to have to be DE. DE is the side that goes between those two angles. So we would need DE to be congruent with, again, the side that goes between the two angles here is JK. So it has to be congruent with JK. And if remember, when you read it, you have angle side angle and angle side angle. Again, the side is between the two angles. That's the reason why it's written that way, angle side angle. All right, side angle side. So remember, it's kind of important to know what's in the middle. I think that helps a lot. So the angle is in the middle. So the angle here has to be between the two sides. So we already have this side on the right side. So if we get the one on the left, then that angle is going to be sitting between those two sides. So we would need this one, which is JI. We would need it to be congruent with, and let's look at the other one. So remember, side, angle, side. So the angle here has to be sitting between the two sides. So we have this one, and so we would need this bottom part for that angle to be sitting in between them. So we need TS. We would need JI to be congruent with TS. So that would make side, angle, side, side, angle, side. Number 13, angle, side, angle. So again, notice the side has to be sitting between the angles. So we have one pair of angles. We have one pair of sides. So now we need the third angle, and the third angle has to make sure that the side is in between. So it can't be this angle because the side over here is not in between those two. It's going to have to be angle L because then the side is between those two angles, and you have angle, side, angle. So it's going to have to be angle L is congruent with, and let's look at the other one. Remember, the side has to be between the two angles, so this one's going to have to be angle T, because then we have that side is sitting between those two angles. And you have angle, side, angle. So it's going to have to be angle L congruent with angle T. All right, just a couple more. Number 14, side, side, side. So remember, we already have a joint side, so that counts as one congruent. Let me put it in red, actually, to indicate that it was already given to us. So the only thing that we would need, if we have one pair of sides congruent, and then we have another pair of sides congruent, because this one is congruent with itself, then we just need the third side. So that would be RS. We would need this one to be congruent with QD. That's the third side of congruence we would need, that RS would be congruent with QD. And then the last one, number 15, side, angle, side. So remember, we have another X, we have a bow tie sort of thing, we have vertical angle here. So these two angles we know them. Again, I'm going to put it in red because I'm going to use red as my color that's indicating what we already know. So we already know that those angles are congruent. So remember, side, angle, side has the angle between the two sides. So if this angle here is sitting between two sides, then the other side that we would need is this one, because we already have that one. So we get the bottom one, then that angle is between the two sides. So we need WV to be congruent with, and let's look at the other triangle. We have the side here, we have the angle here. So if the angle is going to be between the two sides, then we're going to have to need this third side here. Okay, so that angle is sitting between those two sides. So that's WV is congruent with MV. And that's it. That's the whole study guide. So it's a lot there, but I think we can handle it, you know. If you guys need any help, if you guys have any questions, just let me know. I'll see you in class. Good luck on the quiz. All right.